And welcome back to Just Talking Business. We are a small business ourselves, and we launched this show as a way to help small businesses learn a little bit more about how to pivot in some challenging times. Basically starting with the pandemic, but in many cases, there are other reasons why businesses need to shift. And so today's guest, I'm really excited to bring on just because that is actually, she's a leader in a forefront in that ecosystem. We have Joan Godoy from Radical Partners, and what they do is all about helping small businesses figure those kinds of challenging questions out. So here she is. Let me stop talking. Hey, how are you
Hi,
today?
Stephanie.
Thank you for agreeing to join us today. I was just telling my guests that you're a very exciting guest because we're going to talk to you from both sides of the spectrum as both a small business
Mhm.
trying to support small businesses. So that's got to be a tricky conversation with you every day.
It is. It is. I'm excited to have a bold and authentic conversation with you today.
Well, let's start by who are you and what do you do?
Who am I? That's a very complex question. Well, as Stephanie was saying, I'm Joan Godoy. I'm a very proud Guatemalan. I always start with that. Because when you know the reality about Central American countries, you know that these countries are beautiful, yet very diverse, right? And very extreme when it comes to polarization. Rich are very rich, poor people are very poor.
Mhm.
So there's a bit of everything and different bubbles to burst, right? So I grew up in that environment, and I think that really shaped who I am. So
Okay.
what I do today is I'm the executive director of Radical Partners,
Okay.
which is a social impact accelerator, which is
Okay.
completely related to what I was telling you before. Because what we do at RP is that we try to identify the leaders, the initiatives, and the movements that are shaping society, and we try to accelerate that, right? We try to fuel that.
Okay.
And the way we do it is by investing in leaders, by engaging in locals, by co-designing innovative solutions, and by building coalitions so that we can all strengthen our communities, right? So that is extremely tied to who I am, because it's not about creating anything new. It's about finding what's working,
Mhm.
and just pouring some fuel into it by investing in the leadership, by investing some resources, and sometimes by powering connections that
Okay.
will fuel that.
Okay, so who is your target market? Are you mostly focused on small business?
Mm. Great question. So we try to use the word social venture,
Okay.
because social venture, then yes, it includes some small businesses, right? Entrepreneurs that are starting, or small businesses that are growing, but that have a very strong purpose.
Mhm.
Whether that's environment, whether that's gender equity, whether that's racial and social justice, you name it, but the purpose is at the core of the business.
Okay.
Most of the people that we work with are nonprofit leaders, that, if you want to see it that way, that's also just a tax bracket,
Okay.
but it's a small business when it comes to managing and leading teams, etc., right? But when it comes to social ventures, sometimes that could look like a small department,
Mhm.
or a section in a big company or a foundation.
Okay.
So basically, whomever has a bold idea and vision, we help them make it happen, whether they're in government, philanthropy, small businesses, nonprofits, etc.
Well, you're under your dynamic. I think you have not only is it a method of helping the company
Mhm,
accelerate, but
mhm,
it seems like the cohort itself accelerates. It's a very aggressive program that really, as I understand it, it's a couple of weeks, it's a lot of hours. But the have you found that that kind of method has really helped the entrepreneur and or executive director launch what they need in that amount of time?
we have, but I want to make like some distinctions there, right? Our programs are usually between 3 to 6 months.
Okay.
They're very fast paced, though. You're right in that, right? Like every other week, we're meeting for labs, and the weeks in between, they're meeting with coaches and mentors. So we do get the feedback that it is very fast paced.
Mhm, mhm.
Um,
Definitely heard
and although we're trying to, like, we're very mindful about the learning techniques from people, right? Like if you're a more quiet person, how can we provide like quiet time for you, etc. But it's quick on purpose, first of all, because these people are very busy.
Mm-hmm.
Second of all, if their attention span is very limited, right? So it's like, okay, you're going to commit to 3-4 months of this. We're
Mm-hmm.
just going to give you all the tools, but then doing the homework, right, and actually applying this so that you could grow and scale your business, that's on you.
Okay.
So the programs are fast paced, they're very practical and tactical. But then after they graduate, we don't let them go. We always say once a radical partner, always a radical partner. We then move them to our alumni programming.
Okay.
And through our alumni programming, they have access to free coaches, whether that's help in fundraising or sometimes somewhat of like a counseling session that most of these leaders need. Roundtables, gatherings, right? So that they can stay connected to each other. So a fast-paced program, but then they stay with us until they crave it and until they need it.
I actually just talked to someone that is I'm in an organization that went through your program, and she definitely said it had a great impact on the movement of her company. So you're doing good work.
I'm glad to hear that.
So okay, so then let's talk about different sides
Mm-hmm.
of the spectrum. We all just went through a pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe you and I just talked about it. I'll let you get into that if you want to, about a pivot that you were having to make with regards to your business. How do you do that and then keep the businesses that you're working with on task? Or are you in a situation where you have to kind of stop helping and serving, get yourself stabilized, and then move back into the work that you do?
All of the above. But I think if we rewind to 2020, right? Radical Partners was in a very good position when it comes to talking business, right? When it comes to income, when it came to revenue, when it came to team and roles and delegations, etc. And our programming was pretty much all set for 2022. And think that most of our programming were workshops in person, with a lot of people together. We were about convening folks, and all of a sudden, that wasn't possible
Right,
anymore
right,
because of the pandemic. But then the racial reckoning happened. Um, Great, right? But that meant that our funders were pivoting all of their funding towards health and racial and social justice initiatives, right?
right,
So our pipeline was also like, okay, what do we do now, right?
right,
So we did find ourselves at that moment, because of the pandemic, our own personal issues back then, being caregivers or not, our own reflections around our
right.
racial inequity work. We decided to pause,
Okay,
and had very difficult conversations in terms of who are we, right? If we said we are a social impact accelerator and that our mission is to then invest in leaders, engage locals, co-design solutions, and build coalitions, how we do it might change,
right.
but why we do it and what we do won't.
Okay.
And in a moment like that, it was so key for us to be filling out the gaps and to be sustaining the social impact ecosystem, right?
Mhm.
So all of our programming either paused or shifted significantly. To
Okay.
give you very concrete examples, the 10 days of connection, right, which it happens from May 1st to May 10th, so that we could connect locals across lines of difference, we had to pivot everything to the virtual world
Right.
uh, in a matter of like a month and a half. Then our social entrepreneurship bootcamp, we paused. We said nobody's in the mindset right now of thinking how to scale their business. They're
Right.
thinking how to
Exactly.
stay
They're just
alive and how
survive.
to sustain. And last but not least, our leadership lab, which was mostly focused already to grassroots leaders, we
Mhm.
said back in 2020, I remember we had a conversation and we said, we love that the eyes of the world are right now in the leadership of Black leaders, right? And Black communities. But a year from now, this trend might end, and we will be ready then to work with the leaders that emerged from these racial reckoning.
Right.
So
Right.
we shifted our leadership lab and we said we're going to do it specifically for Black, Indigenous, and people of color leaders by Black, Indigenous, and people of color being the coaches, being the facilitators, etc. So it was like a year before that we said next year we're gonna grab all these leaders that are emerging from this amazing movement, and we're going to work with them. So that happened
Very,
last year, and those are three examples of the things that we had to do back then.
very cool. Very cool. And so, in learning what you had to do for yourself, do you think that made you better equipped to help serve the businesses that you help? Where did you shift not only your programming but your mindset around how you could help them?
Yes, I think the biggest lesson that we learned, or that we were reminded of, that we try to tell people, is be very tied and always, always grounded to your why, to
Okay.
your mission, right? Like, why did you open this business? Is it a restaurant? Why? What kind of food did you want to serve? Like, go back and stay grounded to that moment.
Mhm.
That way, if you're grounded to that, you will be able to be flexible and adapt to make sure that that same mission evolves over time, no matter if you have to change the name of the restaurant, if you have to find another income strategy, if you need to merge, if you need to close down, right? And I know it sounds easy, but at Radical Partners, we really strive for something that we call impact versus ego.
Okay.
It's not easy at all, especially in hard moments, right? But we see, especially in the nonprofit ecosystem, so many leaders trying to fundraise and stay alive just because they want to keep doing their programming. And
Right.
2020 came here to remind them, like, maybe your people don't need that anymore.
Right.
So if you're here to serve that specific community, ask them, what do they need now? And if your mission is true, then you'll shift your programming, you'll shift your activities to keep serving that need. So that's what we always try to remind people. And we start all of our programming with, what is your theory of change?
Right. Right.
And when that no longer serves you, it's hard, but you have to drop it if you really want to sustain, keep playing that infinite game.
Did you have to advise any companies through a closing? We had a guest on once that actually had to close their business during the pandemic, and it actually was. I still talk about that show because it was so powerful. Just in that, the emotional and that she had to go through to get to that, to make that decision, and then the after fact. Did you have to have some of those hard and fast conversations with some of your businesses, and how did you advise them to to cut the loss and move on?
Yeah. So I can't think of an example of someone that entirely closed down, right? I do know certain leaders that shifted significantly, that their venture might be somewhat dormant because they had to find a full-time job.
Right.
Um,
Uh,
I think the feeling is still the same, right? Like, most of
yeah,
them
exactly.
feel
It's
like
still
they
like a
failed.
failure. Hmm.
Like they failed, and this is what we try to talk to them about, right? Like, if you're really a smart and bold leader, the context also dictates what you have and what you do, right? So it's not necessarily only your failure. That the society changed significantly
Hmm.
because of several things. So either another venture will come, or your venture will have to be shifted once you deal with that loss, because it still feels like a loss.
Right. It does. I mean, it's your baby. You've grown this baby up and now it's dead. That's got to be a real conversation. So for you, what do you consider as success metrics for you as Radical Partners? What's success to you?
I love that you asked that, because recently, after evaluating like all of our programming and how we measure our success,
Hmm.
um, definitely we could measure outputs, right, in terms of how many people are showing up, what is happening, etc. But throughout our programming and everything we do, we measure through four pillars of success, right?
Okay.
One is, what skills did these leaders that went through our programming or our coaching or a call with Radical Partners gained, right? So we do want to see an increase in certain skills or learnings that people had. Secondly is, what impact are they having because they went through our programming, right? So this is where we measure that someone raised $250,000 because they went through our programming, etc. But it's not our work, it's their impact, and we measure our success based on their impact and the
Okay.
scalability of that. Thirdly, we measure collaboration.
Mhm.
That is very important to us. Like, who and what, because of the work that we're doing, now is partnering with others, or is now part of a consortium, or is now part of an initiative that's within a collective. And last but not least, Stephanie, for us, belonging is very important. And belonging, we measure it like, are they feeling less lonely because they're part of this radical partners tribe? Do they feel like they can be their authentic selves as leaders? Can they dress however they want? Can they speak the way they want?
Mhm.
When they, especially when talking with people that have historically have had power.
Mhm.
So belonging is definitely an important um, like measurement of success, to make sure that we're not graduating in a cookie cutter form, but that we're actually graduating a group of very diverse leaders that feel very comfortable with who they are and thrive that way.
Do you feel that shifting in the ecosystem, especially that last subject matter there, before the pandemic, there felt like there were models that had to be followed, but that piece, that belonging piece, seems to have a little bit more of a shift, I guess. Are you finding that the ecosystem is also shifting in sort of that dynamic is we want diverse, unique leaders that are going to make a real impact in our community?
I would say, luckily, yes.
Okay.
Right? And we see it in very simple things like advertisement, for example.
Mhm.
Now you see a Tide commercial where both mom and dad are doing the laundry, right?
Right.
In every single commercial now, you see either a Latino person or a Black person.
That's
And,
true.
and 2 years ago, that wasn't that way, right? So in a matter of 2 years, that shifted significantly. So I think it is beautiful to see how society pushed for that. And
Mhm.
now brands are having to respond to the diversity that we want to see. Um, yes, at that surface level, but I think the mental models and the mindset, it's what's the hardest thing to change.
Mhm. Mhm.
And what we can control is making sure that we're inviting diverse people to certain spaces to make sure that they're part of the equation.
Mhm.
But what we can control the most is to make sure that the leaders that we work with step into their power. And
Mm.
that is very hard, Stephanie.
Yeah.
um, because First Lab, they show up all dressed up, right? Like tidy hair, etc. And it takes them a while to figure out, like, oh, I can actually wear my hoops and still like give a great pitch.
Mhm.
I know it sounds very, very simple, and I'm sure you can relate with this, but it takes us a while to not only feel comfortable, but to feel powerful in bringing our like all of our identities to
Right.
a space that's not necessarily ready for that.
Right. I agree. I completely agree with that. So now let's shift a little bit. I was
Mhm.
looking at your bio, and this goes from success to screw ups. You are the co-founder of an organization called the Fuckup Movement. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is Fuckup Nights. Yeah.
Okay, when I read it, I was actually impressed only because, as you mentioned earlier, we're all sort of working in our silo. We screw up all the time. I swear I feel like a failure every other day. And to know that there's a society of people like me out there that are business owners that can really express their screw ups, but how they have come back from that just sounds very powerful to me. So tell me a little bit about the organization and what you
Have
think you've gained from it, and
mhm.
why you would encourage others to do so as well.
Happy to. So I think Fuck Up Nights is all about breaking stereotypes. Let me start with the origin story. This was a movement that started in Mexico, right? So their headquarters are based in Mexico. Um, and it happened very organically when five entrepreneurs who happened to be friends, they started talking about why their businesses or their startups were failing. And they realized that they all made similar mistakes, but they didn't talk to each other about them. So they were making the similar mistakes, right?
Mhm.
So they said, like, why don't we do this then? Like, why don't we just have a typical panel of 3, 4 people that come and talk about their experience, but they tell us why they fucked up. What is it that they did, or what is it that they didn't, that led their business to fail? So it has a very nerdy element, because when you see the statistics of how many entrepreneurs or startups fail, it's crazy. And it's mostly because they didn't sign contracts, or they partnered with a friend, or the mistakes are very similar, but you can't really read that much about them. So then you end up like, oh, the same thing happened to me. It's like, why? Let's share our learnings so that hopefully this doesn't happen to other people. So now it is a global movement that is in more than 90 countries and 300 cities, Miami being one of them. And the idea is that at a fuck up nights, you show up, you have 3 to 4 speakers that tell you about their fuck up story. And what I love about it is that we don't necessarily focus on, oh, I fucked up and now I'm here.
Right.
Tell us why, like what happened, how did you feel? Let's talk about all the things that we can't read and can't watch anywhere, so that people actually have access to that dark side.
Right.
So I think when it comes to our measure of success, there is like, first of all, it's very cathartic for the presenter themselves, right? It requires a lot of bravery for you to stand up in front of strangers and talk about your worst moment. But then the audience definitely leaves with learnings. Oh, oh shit, like I'm not doing this, or I should be doing that. And then again, the sense of belonging of like, okay, we're all human. And even if, or even when this happened to us, there's a community around us that have ideas that can give us advice, etc. So it's a very powerful community, and it's beautiful to see how people enter this space a little afraid, in need of a beer, and then how they leave. They just you could see the relief in people's bodies.
Now, do you ever call someone on their crap if they're not really giving you, or you feel like they're not giving you the truth? Do you call them on their crap and say, hey, that's not true?
We do, Stephanie. You know me. I try to do that before the night of, right? And when we're curating this story, because it's typically, humans typically want to introduce themselves, right, and share their credentials, and then end with a happy story. So what I usually tell them is, don't worry about your intro. I will take care of that. Don't waste time introducing yourself and giving your credentials. So we try to make the intro, and then we tell them the best gift that you could tell people, or that give people, are the 2 or 3 learnings that happen in your fuck up night, or in your fuck up story. The happy ending, that's the first question. I guarantee you that the first question from the audience is, where are you now? What are you doing now? So that happens. So to answer your question, yes, in the curation, we make sure that we focus on the failure, and we remove the layers. For some people, it takes 1 call. For some others, it takes 2 or 3. And a couple of glasses of wine before they go to.
I can imagine, because you're just, especially if you're new to the group, you don't know these people. You're in a world, it's society, especially in America, where failure is not an option, and looking like you failed is absolutely not an option. So to be in a place and space where you feel safe, I've actually pulled together some of my girlfriends to be able to do that, just to have somebody I can cry on their shoulder. So that's cool. I think that's a very cool thing, and I'll probably be calling you about that a little bit later. So now let's shift a little bit. You mentioned earlier you or Radical Partners launched 10 Days of Connection. That is something, if I believe correctly, is a program that you launched here in Miami. It's been going on now for maybe 4 years?
This is year 6.
I was about to say, because I remember when it first launched. And I'll say it's really become sort of a powerful 10 days. Now I sat in on your initial introduction to it, and have talked to several people who've either been in a 10-day connection or have done a 10-day or hosted a 10-day connection. What prompted starting this, and how do you feel like this lends itself to the work that you're doing?
So the 10 Days of Connection started after the 2016 elections in the United States, right? Like there was certain permission in the air for you to be aggressive to people, either on the boss or in conversations, etc. So it was Roberta Shevin from MCCJ that came to certain female leaders in the community, including Radical Partners, and said, we have to do something, right? Just so that people can agree to disagree. And removing the hatred out of the equation, right? Like, how can we be respectful and kind in our conversations when talking about politics or other things? So the 10 Days of Connection came to be in May of 2017, and it was somewhat of a festival to have conversations that are somewhat difficult, right? Either Democrats and Republicans, either Jews and Muslims, either people from more affluent neighborhoods going to other neighborhoods in Miami that they're scared of because they've never been there before. But over the years, Stephanie, it has really evolved, right? Because I think the the people co-organizing the 10 days, because that's the beauty of it. Radical Partners is producing the initiative behind the scenes, but the initiative is successful based on almost 200 leaders that say, I'm going to host a conversation, or I am going to bring my people to that event. So they are the ones that think of, what are the topics that we want to talk about? What are the bridges that we want to build? So over the years, we, the hosts, have been a little bit more comfortable making it harder, and pushing a little bit more, right? So long story short, it happens for 10 days, May 1st to May 10th. And we have 10 topics that we say in here. We do talk about politics, sex, religion, all the things that your family would typically say, you don't talk about that with people that you love, right? So we have an array of almost 75 events during the 10 days. But now we say there are different levels of intensity, right? So if you're not ready to have a hard conversation, just go to Little Haiti. There's a tour on May 1st. Go and check it out, right? Like, go and see the community, enjoy the food, go to a place that you've never been. That's like a very light intensity level, that it's still pushing you outside of your comfort zone and still showing you a new perspective. But then we go all the way to having an interfaith iftar at FIU, and you have leaders from the Muslim community, from the Buddhist community, from the Catholic Church, talking about the similarities and the differences of religion, and just agreeing to disagree on certain things, and keeping the respect and the love in between, right? Which is something that all religions share. So in summary, it is free for everybody to participate, either by attending a connection experience or by hosting something in your block too, right? Like, can you host a potluck with neighbors that you don't know their names? And the idea is just to learn something new. And as I said, like, tying it back to the beginning, Radical Partners accelerate, right? So people say, oh, why only 10 days? First of all, it's exhausting.
Let's be real honest about that.
But second of all, we don't know at all, right? Like, we're not the experts in sex or politics or gender. So we spark these conversations. And the idea is, once you know a new person, once you know a new organization, keep being involved, right? And keep doing things with them all year long, until we're ready to come back in May and have some conversations again.
Can you still be a host?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can.
All right.
You can. There are some logistics there, right? Like, if you're hosting a public event, I would say, if you're seeing this, like, go to 10daysofconnection.org today and try to register your connection experience. That way we can promote it, right? Because even if you upload it, let's say May 1st, people won't necessarily see it, right? So if it's a public event, but if it's a private thing, by all means, if you're doing something with your friends, if you're doing something with your family, you can register it, just so that we know that you did it, and so that we can shout out yourself as a host. And sometimes hosting also means having a conversation on the elevator, right? Or with the cashier at Publix. Who are you? What's your name? What's your story? You can do that all year long.
I know the first time I ever had any exposure to it, I was working with a nonprofit that they did one of your 10-day activities, and it was based in CIC Miami. I last month was on a panel with a woman who's now about to do a 10 days of connection in Homestead. So I was like, wow, this thing has really, really grown. So definitely next year. I thought about it this year, but I was like you said, I can't get it done. But next year, I definitely want to see if I can pull together some people to talk about ageism. That's important.
And if you're interested in ageism, Stephanie, I think the Girl Scouts is doing an intergenerational event around civics. And so I think they're going to be combining or bringing women from all ages, literally 80 years old to 65-year-old or more. So you can attend that one. And what I tell people, sometimes showing up is even more powerful than hosting, right? Because now we have 70 events. Think of 70 events in 10 days. We need participants, right? We need participants to be curious, to bring their people, their friends, their family. Most importantly, those who aren't in the social impact space or still don't know what diversity, equity, and inclusion means. Those are the ones that we want in that space.
And you could go to this website and find out where all those events are going to be and sign up there, correct?
Yes, ma'am. People can go to www.10, the number 10, daysofconnection.org, and there's a 2022 calendar. And you could filter by location, because we're doing this in Miami and Broward,
Okay.
and some people host online, by date or by topic.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I can see you're a very busy woman. So I want to hog a whole lot more of your time. But I would like to ask, if you have, first of all, any final words for leaders, small business owners, coming out of the pandemic, looking at new opportunities, what comes up to you to say out loud, this is where you should be, or this is how you should be looking. And then I also, before you leave, want to find out, how do we find you?
Thank you, Stephanie. I think I want to say three things to whomever is listening to this. One is, you're not crazy, you're not alone, right? Like the moment is intense. And we all went through this very rough 2-year period, if not before, right? Because we've all been dealing with things before the pandemic. But the context is making it more complex to people that have been historically marginalized. Your mental health is also in a different location, etc. So again, you're not crazy, you're not alone. It is completely normal to go through all of the thoughts and feelings that you're going through right now. So validate that. And be gracious with yourselves as much as possible, right? Because we tend to not stop. Even when we go to bed, we're thinking about our team and what's going to happen with this person and what's going to happen with cash flow, etc. So just validate that and sit with that, and don't blame yourself for that. That's number one. Number two is being aware that society is going through a shift. I think you need to find moments to analyze that, to really take it all in, to see if you're dancing or like swimming against the current without a purpose. Right. Because maybe you can keep hustling. It's not a matter of ability or skill. You can definitely keep hustling. The question is, are you hustling and investing your energy in the right place? So read your environment, right? Like maybe do another market research, talk to your people, talk to your friends, understand the gaps, and then again, ground yourself to why you're doing what you're doing, to make sure that you're hustling and investing your energy in the right place. And then the third one is, I like to think that whatever you need, you can find it, right? Whether that is a line of credit at a bank that maybe you don't know about, whether that is free space for you to go and co-work from there at the libraries, at the Capital One cafes. I should charge for advertisement myself.
You see what he's saying? I did all of a sudden, because I know there's one in Brickell.
No, but in all seriousness, there are organizations out there, right? Like Access Helps through the Urban Impact Lab, some mini grants, etc. So if you don't know where to find them, come to people like Stephanie, come to people like us at Radical Partners, and we will guide you in the right direction, because there are resources out there. Some of them are easier to access than others, but there is help, and there is a hand there somewhere. So with that said, I will end up by saying that you can find us at Radical Partners wherever you want to find us: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, our website. It's all radical.partners. So you can find us there. If we can help you, we will. If we can't, we will hopefully send you to people that can. And we're excited to see you hopefully out and about during the 10 days of connection, at some Fuckup Nights, or applying to one of our programs to accelerate your work too.
Yeah, I'll definitely be calling you about that Fuckup. Thank you for joining us today. I really do appreciate you taking some time. And I really do encourage everyone to go to the 10 Days Connection. It's very, very cool. Actually, I've been to a couple over the years. So thank you so much for joining us. And I will be in touch soon. And good luck on your search for in the ecosystem.
Thank you, Stephanie. I really always love talking to you, and I really appreciate this space that you're creating for us, but most importantly for the people watching. So
thank you
again.
You have a great day.
You too.
Bye-bye.